Hey everyone, Dr. Stacy Barker here. I get a lot of questions about school funding and how all of that works together to get schools into our districts to pay for resources for our students and staff. So I wanted to give you a little visual about how school finance works, and my daughter Anna is going to be helping me.
Hey!
She's going to be handing me a few things so that we
Jelly
can.
beans.
That's right, jelly beans, so that we can visualize for you how school funding works. So, the first type of school funding that schools get is federal funding. So, this comes from different grants like Title I grants for economically disadvantaged students or schools that have a preponderance of economically disadvantaged students. And then also things like child nutrition. And that usually makes up maybe about 10% of the funding that schools get. So, I'm going to put a few of these federal dollars into our budget.
That's a few more than a few.
Yeah, well, it's about 10%. So we're going to have like one little row here of federal funding. So the next type of funding, which is about 30 to 35% of school budgets, it comes from the state. And it comes in the form of different, what they call allotments. So the first type of allotments are what I call student allotments. And so this is state funding for different kinds of students. And the first type that comes in is the basic allotment. So every school gets about $6,000, $6,150 for each student for regular programming. Then a little more goes in for special education and dyslexia services. A little more goes in for compensatory services. For instance, that might be pregnant students that leave school for a while. We have to make up their learning. Then we have, lost one. Then we have some more for bilingual services, a little bit more for career and technology education, early education, that's our pre-K programs, a little bit more for gifted and talented programs, and a little bit more for dropout recovery and residential facility treatment programs, college prep certification reimbursements. That one's really cool, and it just went into place with House Bill 3. What that does is it gives the district a reimbursement for AP tests, not AP tests, SAT tests, ACT tests, and industry-based certification tests that students take, up to one per student, that the district can be reimbursed for so that they can be college and career and military ready. In addition, depending on how many students are college, career, and military ready, the school can get bonus outcome money for those students to put back into their college, career, and military ready programs. So that's all of our student funding from the state. Then we also have a little bit of funding for allotments for staff members in the district. And these you typically have to apply for, but there is a teacher incentive allotment that Lewisville ISD has applied for. There's also a mentor program allotment, but LISD hasn't applied for that, and so I'm not putting that into there, but some districts do. In addition, the last little bit of state funding that schools get, I put into the bucket of infrastructure. So this would be things like if a school is small or mid-size or rural, there are allotments for that. LISD is not one of those schools that gets a small, mid-size, or rural allotment. In addition, there's fast growth districts that are seeing a lot of students move in, not LISD, so they don't get that allotment. However, there are allotments for things like school safety. That would pay for resource officers or other upgrades to buildings to make them safer. Transportation funding for school buses and things along those lines. New instructional facility funding for a new elementary school or a new CTE facility. And then also there's a little bit of state aid that comes into play for state aid for the homestead exemptions that lower the tax revenue for a particular district. All right, then the biggest chunk, so this is going to be upwards of 55% of a school's budget, comes from local property taxes. And there are actually two kinds of property taxes that districts collect. The first kind is called maintenance and operations, and it does just what it sounds like it does. It helps to maintain and operate the school district. The second type of funding is called interest and sinking funds. Those funds are to help pay debt services for bonds that the district has received for things like new facilities or other things that bonds might go towards. So M&O, maintenance and operations taxes, and interest and sinking, INS taxes. So we're going to fill up, because it's more than half of the budget.
Can I fill some?
Sure. Go ahead. Do a little bit less of those. We're using our pink here as our INS.
So like,
Yeah, maybe a little bit more. Yeah.
that?
And then the rest of it let's go all the way to the top. This is our maintenance and operations taxes. So those property taxes that you pay, some of that goes into interest and sinking, and some of it goes into this maintenance and operations taxes. And that helps make sure that we can pay for everything we need to pay for our school.
That's a lot of this.
There's a lot of that. And this is why we talk about how the burden of paying for our public schools really comes to our local. You see how much? It's over half of the budget is the local dollars that are coming from property taxes. Now, I wish we could say that we're done, but we're not done, because the state uses a formula to say how much of this a district is entitled to. And then there's something called excess of entitlement. So for Lewisville ISD, in 1920, that was about $14 million. It's looking like this year it might be close to $46 million. That what is called excess of entitlement, you might also hear it called recapture. I'm sure you have, because I get a lot of questions about recapture. So the state has a formula that they go through all of this funding and all of these allotments, and they say, okay, Lewisville ISD, you're entitled to have money up to here. And so then what the state does, you want to take a few out?
Yes.
Okay, so then what the state does is it takes some off the top, and it says this is your in excess of entitlement or recapture that we're going to take back to the state. That's good. That we're going to take back to the state and use to fund the foundation school program, which is all of these allotments. Basically, what it allows the state to do is to take property taxes from those districts that produce more property taxes, put it back into the foundation fund so that the state can continue paying for that basic allotment and those other allotments for school districts that don't have the same level of property taxes. Now, that's pretty controversial. And it was originally created as a Band-Aid to some lawsuits that Texas was in around their school funding program. It wasn't really intended to last this long. The legislature came up with the recapture program as kind of a last-minute effort to put something into place. And it keeps getting reformed. It was reformed under House Bill 3 in 1819, but it lessened recapture, but it didn't totally reform the entire system. And a lot of people ask me, like, what can you do about recapture? And I'll tell you, school board members, what they can do is they can advocate. We can talk to legislatures, we can advocate through the Texas Association of School Boards, but there's nothing that we can do policy-wise about recapture. That's a legislative decision. So for recapture, you need to talk to your state senators and state representatives and have them fully fund public education. So all these other colors, this green and this orange and this purple, shift back up so that there's less of a burden on local property taxes. What we can do as school boards is we can make sure that these funds get equitably redistributed within our own district so that our campuses across the district have the resources that they need. And that's what I would continue to bring to Lewisville ISD, is to continue that process of making sure that we're getting the right resources to the right campuses. I hope this gave you a little bit more information about school funding. Have a great weekend.